Magnolia has the best opening 10 minutes of any movie ever made. Heads up, from the next video I'll be changing the name of the channel to Tongue-Tied. Not because I'm a huge group love fan, because frankly, I'm not. But just because I made the name the Gazorpatron when I was 15 and I think it's just a bit crap. So if you see this new name in your sub box if you're subscribed, then don't think I've been hacked by the Globuloid Collective. If you haven't seen this absolute masterpiece of a movie, just go and watch it right now. It's only, oh Jesus, it's 3 hours and 8 minutes long. It's only 3 hours and 8 minutes, I can't say that convincingly, I'm sorry. It's a long film. That's a long time. But you'll know if it's worth it after the first 10 minutes because, and I don't mean to repeat myself here, but I feel like it's worth saying twice, Magnolia has the best opening 10 minutes of any film ever made. And I'm gonna try and explain why. A narrator tells us 3 stories of wild coincidence. One is of a man being murdered in a town called Greenberry Hill by a group of men whose names put together are Greenberry Hill. 2 is of the aftermath of a fight between 2 men, in which one, completely by accident, picks up the other who is scuba diving while scooping up water to help fight a wildfire. Oh my God! 3 is of a man who was going to commit an unsuccessful suicide by jumping off a building, not knowing that there was a safety net that would break his fall, becoming the victim of a successful homicide, as one of the rooms he falls by contains a gun that misfires out the window the exact moment he passes, killing him instantly. Cut. Titles. Cut. Frank T.J. Mackey, a pickup guru selling a course to horny, sad men to help them trick women into having sex with them. Cut. Claudia Gator, an emotionally vulnerable drug addict who is pressured into sex by a man who preys on her weakness. Cut. Jimmy Gator, host of a game show called What Do Kids Know for 30 years, portrayed in the media as a wholesome family man despite blatant infidelity and estrangement to Claudia Gator, who is his daughter. Cut. Stanley Spector, prodigy competitor on What Do Kids Know, who is simultaneously pressured by his father into achieving his idea of success and emotionally neglected by that same father. Cut. Donnie Smith, a record setter in the early days of What Do Kids Know, we see him preparing to get his braces fitted and crashing his car into a grocery store. Cut. Phil Farmer, a nurse. He looks after Earl Partridge, an ex-television mogul suffering from melanemic cancer of the brain and lungs. Cut. Linda Partridge. Earl Partridge's unfaithful trophy wife makes a frantic phone call to a doctor before coldly kissing Earl on the forehead and getting into her car. She is wrecked with all kinds of guilt and frustration. Cut. Jim Curran, a police officer who eats breakfast, makes a phone call to a dating hotline, works out, showers, prays and goes to work. He monologues about his job to himself in the car. Cut. Then we see the first scene of the movie. Oh boy, there has never been a 3-hour film this dense. You would be hard pressed to find any film this dense, let alone one that has to continue that vibe for another 2 hours and 56 minutes after the fact. There's just so much to unpack here. Let's start with exposition. Every film or piece of media that isn't based on a previous property and doesn't have something else to lean on has to set up everything the audience needs to know within a span of time before they get bored. Now for me, my attention span has been on a steady decline over the past few years because of Chinese data harvesting scams, TikToks.
I love Alvin running after it.
But for now at least, I still have the retention required to get invested in new characters, worlds and stories. So how does Magnolia do this with its opening? By concisely acquainting us with a web of interconnected characters through dense vignettes of characterization. Each character we see has so much inherent personality shown through their writing and their body language, and something very important that a lot of films miss out on when it comes to characterization is having the characters act not how they are, but how they want to be seen. If it's done right, we can sense this huge gulf between these two factors, and it makes the people in the movie seem much more realistic. Because people in real life don't go around expressing their truest feelings and desires. There are always layers and filters in between what you think and what you do. And if a character in a piece of media can visualize this internal struggle, for me at least, it makes that character seem a lot more relatable and it engages me with the piece of media a whole lot more. In Magnolia, Everyone is holding back so much and is so desperate to portray themselves as what they want to be. Frank T.J. Mackey wants so bad to look like a ladies' man, like the champion of women. He literally called his course Seduce and Destroy. Sure, he's successful at it to an extent. He's handsome and confident, and he's definitely had sex with a lot of women. By his own metric of success, he should be happy and satisfied, but it is his metric that is the problem, so he's not. I know that anyone with the outlook of Frank T.J. Mackey is never going to be happy, no matter how many women they fuck. And I think that he knows this, but this knowledge is lost in the gulf between thought and action, so he continues to act in this incredibly selfish way. Claudia Gator is similar. She wants to be wholesome. She wants a life that isn't plagued by depravity and drugs. And this vague, generalized hope is what makes her vulnerable, and is why the skeezy guy approached her at the bar in the first place. He probably wouldn't have gone for it if she was some absolutely hopeless wretch. Her hope causes her sensitivity and hence her vulnerability. And even though we get this palpable sense just by looking at her body language and face, she refuses to ever act on her desire to have a normal life, similarly to how Frank T.J. Mackey refuses to ever treat women with respect, even if it would make him happier. It's just lost in translation. This problem with Claudia Gator is compounded by her drug addiction, but there's a reason she even went down that path in the first place, so it's always been there. I won't bore you with any further examples, but this level of analysis can be applied to any character in the intro. From just a couple of little scenelets, we are transported into the mental states of each person, and from each mental state we find that they are deeply unhappy because they refuse to let something go, whether it's their youth, their control, or their guilt. Each character is desperate for something. This desperation is shown through the camera movements throughout the opening. There are loads of these crash zooms that close in on the characters, kind of like how they feel the world is closing in on them. And we also get a lot of close tracking shots, mirroring a character's desperate movement and keeping track of their frantic body language. There are almost no moments of peace or stillness for the entire introduction. Even the title card is a cacophonic frenzy of shape and colour. But all that changes when we get introduced to Jim Curing, the police officer, who is possibly the most important character in all of the intro because of how different he is to everyone else. I've already mentioned how the cinematography portrays a kind of desperation within each character through harsh movements and zooms, but with Jim Curing, the camera either stays completely still or slow and sweeping, and his performance is completely different as well. Unlike all the other characters who feel like they're at the very end of their tether, frantically gripping on with white-hot determination, Jim is calm and controlled, and he keeps his life in a neat little order. And yet, on the inside he's just as lonely as everyone else. I think to understand why, we have to talk about thematics. Magnolia is a film about where you draw the line between coincidence and divine intervention. The three stories the narrator tells at the beginning are about events so strenuously unbelievable that they make him question the nature of coincidence. He laments that there has to be a reason for such things, that events that completely by chance cause such pain and heartbreak can't just happen. And so because of that, when we are introduced to the characters we follow for the film, we have this notion that they are all connected in some way. Sure, some of them are already intertwined. Claudia Gator is Jimmy Gator's daughter. Donnie Smith and Stanley Spector were both competitors on Jimmy Gator's show at different times, and Linda Partridge is Earl Partridge's wife. But beyond that, all the characters feel connected in some deeper kind of way. Frank T.J. Mackey's commercial plays in the background of many scenes. Many of the characters are introduced through the television that could be being watched by any of the other characters. The TV show What Do Kids Know seems like the underlying strand between a lot of the people, but it doesn't connect everyone. Jim Curing and Frank T.J. Mackey have nothing to do with it, seemingly. So in turn, we realize that the underlying connection between all the characters is loneliness. How do I know that? How would you know that after watching only 10 minutes of a 3-hour movie? Well, it's because of the thing that is perhaps the most important to the tone and feeling of the opening of Magnolia. During the introduction to the characters, the Harry Nilsson song One is covered by Amy Mann. The chord progression sounds both strangely optimistic and comfortingly melancholic, And that, combined with the lyrics constantly reiterating and elaborating that everyone has countless past regrets, that being alone is much worse than being connected, that one is the loneliest number, gives us the impression that all the characters are just lonely. Regardless of all the shields that they put up around themselves, the layers of personality and circumstance in between each person and each person's surroundings are just window dressing to the fact that they are all really, really lonely. Everything that we will see now is just a product of that. One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. Two can be as bad as one. It's the loneliest number since the number one. No.
Years ago, I was Chinese.